like I'm thankful that the team there is listening to the fans. Like that's what you
Yeah.
should be doing. You should be listening to the fans.
Hi, this is Sonny, finally back with another video. As announced in the teaser, I would like to talk about Valaverse Action Force today. Originally, I wanted to deal with that topic before Joe Fest. Now we way past PowerCon. But that might not be such a bad thing, since there's more to talk about. I will put in timestamps, but I would appreciate if you first watch the video in full. Okay, so I would like to deal with what I like about Action Force first. And for the most part, I now could tune into the same chant as other YouTubers had done before me. So the quality of the plastic, the articulation, posability of the figures, the amount of accessories they come in with, multiple pairs of hands, multiple weapons, a figure stand, the ability to trade, mix and match body parts with multiple figures. Everything certainly adds to the value of the product. And by decreasing the prices on his products, Bobby Vala actually increased the value even further. Because usually you would think that if a product is in high demand, prices would either stay the same or go up. I mean, supply and demand. But he made one thing clear, since he said that he can lower the prices because he, over time now, has increased his order quantity because there are more and more people buying his products. He's getting better conditions. He pays less per item. But instead of increasing his margins or profits, he decided to make his products more affordable. He also proved what a friend of mine used to say: if you mind your quality, you reduce your cost long term. If you mind your cost, and since Bobby Vala owns Valaverse, it's a private company, he has way more freedom in his decision making, but also more or higher liability than a CEO of a public company, because they are basically employees with a way better contract than the usual common employee. And as such, they have to operate in the best interest of the shareholders, more or less. Originally, I wanted to go into more detail regarding this matter, but I think that is enough for a video of its own. Instead, I would like to point out a few things that I do not like so much about Action Force. I mean, of course, no toy line is perfect, but there are some things which could have been more thought through, in my opinion. Oh, one more thing before we start. Some of you probably are going to accuse me of nitpicking, but it's the small details which make an action figure or a military-based toy line much more realistic. And if you like to disagree on that, I actually was paraphrasing.
I'm sure some of you probably think I'm just nitpicking right now, but it's little details like this that make an action figure look so much more realistic.
See? And remember, folks, equal rights for everyone, since
every human being on this earth has value, including you.
Thank you, Tony. So now that this is out of the way, let's jump right in. I would like to start with the Garrison Cavalry. Now, this is one of the few figures I did not purchase due to the following reasons. First would be the helmet, which is, I get it, medieval style, but the visor has a very small slit, so it will most likely impair vision. I don't know how deep the helmet goes, it might even cover the ears, so that would be another factor, impairing hearing, but mostly it's about the vision. Would have been nice to capture the medieval style with technology combined. And also this would make this whole thing more believable, because I wouldn't like to even try to aim with that heavy helmet downside on a rifle, especially. That's another thing, it's a naked G36. I don't know why there are no kind of more advanced sights on that weapon, but this is, I would like to cover this on separately. Another thing is the figure comes with a knife. From a cavalry, I would expect something heavier, like a saber or some sort of a heavy bladed weapon, or maybe a bayonet for the rifle. And lastly, the figure is called Garrison Cavalry. A cavalry usually comes with a ride, so Bobby Vala should have introduced a vehicle for those guys as soon as possible. Of course, he can still do that, but as for now, those garrison guys are not very appealing to me because of that circumstance. Next would be the Swarm Trooper, which I actually bought a few from, but the Swarm gear pack, in my opinion, is essential for this figure due to several reasons. First, I would like to talk about the base weapon, which comes with the figure, the Chris Vector, which is included. Some of you might now say, oh, that's really cool, a modern weapon. So I would say, let's take a closer look. And by its appearance with this very long barrel, I would say this is a Chris Vector carbine. Now, what does that mean? The Chris Vector carbine has actually been designed and produced for the civilian market, and as such, as a semi-auto only, meaning only one shot per trigger pull. Now, some of you might argue that, oh, this could be remodified or whatever, fixed, and that a weapon could fire full auto again. But why the extra effort when you can just buy the full auto version? Another thing is, the aforementioned long barrel. Since the Chris Vector is using pistol ammunition, like the full auto versions either go with 9mm Luger or 45 ACP. This is common pistol ammunition using quick burning powder, in contrast to rifle ammunition, which contains long burning powder in order to make use of a long barrel. So the general assumption would be that the long barrel would extend the effective range of the weapon. It does so, but very limitedly. Doesn't have that much effect, and that's not the purpose of that barrel. Actually, the purpose of that barrel is to prevent or at least complicate concealed carrying. That is what it's for. The weapon is made extra long, so it's more difficult to hide it. And since I mentioned ammunition, 9mm Luger, 45 ACP. Those are regular pistol ammunitions used in common handguns. Problem is they are much weaker than rifle ammunition, even an intermediate cartridge from an M4 like the 5.56 NATO. So these weapons will struggle to even pierce through Class 2A body armor at short ranges, like maybe 15 meters, and soft body armor like Class 2A is not that difficult to come by. It will totally fail against tri-set armor, which is 20 layers of Kevlar combined with 1.6 millimeters of titanium. No chance at all with these. Another issue I have with this weapon in particular here is that it does not have a magazine which stands out. Usually if it's 30 round magazine for the 9mm or 25 round for the 45 ACP, it would stand out of the gun. So this weapon looks like it has a Glock magazine inserted. Yes, the Chris Vector can use Glock magazines, either from the Glock 17 or Glock 19, that would be 9mm, features 17 rounds, maybe 19 rounds of ammunition, or from the Glock 21, that's 45 ACP, that would be 13 rounds. So you have at best 19 rounds in the magazine, with 45 ACP only 13. So if, just hypothetically, that weapon would be firing full auto, which in case of the Chris Vector would be somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 rounds per minute, hypothetically or theoretically. So let's say to make it simple, 1,200 rounds per minute, 20 rounds per second. So that pistol magazine is empty in less than a second. Lots of mag changes and running out of ammo quickly might be a common problem among the Swamp Troopers laced with that gun. You have to hit the target probably multiple times to have a certain effect. So you're wasting a lot of ammo in the process, and in my opinion, a decent assault rifle would have been way better. It gets somewhat better with the Swarm Gear Pack, which in my opinion is essential because of the jetpack, which makes the Swamp Trooper look far more interesting. And of course the weapons included, which would be the Milker Grenade Launcher, quite effective if you don't care much about collateral. And then there is the MP7, which totally outshines the Chris Vector, or the Chris Vector carbine in particular. The MP7 uses specialized 4.6mm by 30mm ammunition. Oh yeah, for those of you who do not know about what these numbers mean, I guess most of you will do, but just for the ones who don't know, the first number is always the diameter of the bullet, so that's how big it is or how wide it is. And the second number is the length of the case, and only the case, not the full cartridge. This weapon, effective range, maybe 100 meters. This weapon, effective range 200 meters, and the ammunition of it is supposed to penetrate soft body armor at the full effective range of 200 meters. And it's even supposed to penetrate tri-set armor at the effective range, at least according to the manufacturer, Heckler & Koch. And I also would like to point out that the Chris Vector is not really highly popular among military and police around the world. There are only 3 countries where it's actually in use by military or police forces. So the question now, of course, you might have is, why would Bobby Vala pick such a weapon? Well, my guess is it's about aesthetics. He liked the looks of the gun, so that's why he implemented it. Which, yeah, I can to some extent understand, because Bobby Vala is an artist, so he often goes by the looks or the aesthetics of something, of an object or whatever person. But in case of weaponry, I say functionality beats aesthetics. Which leads me to my next case on Bobby Vala's and also Tony Roberts' dislike and prejudice towards bullpup rifles. Here are some excerpts from the 3POA.
I can tell you that the AUG will never be in the line. I think that might be next to a Glock and a Beretta. That's the most hideous firearm ever made. So you'll never.
You mean from an aesthetic perspective, or
yes, from an aesthetic point of view, I think the AUG is just one of the ugliest rifles, if not the ugliest rifle like ever made.
Look, I used the Steyr in the Australian Army.
Mm-hmm.
I went into the Australian Army out of high school. I used the F88 Steyr AUG. Then in my early 20s, moved back to the UK, joined the British Army, used the SA80, and I hate both of those weapons. They are the most awkward, fucking impractical design for an assault rifle you can imagine. Some people really rate the Steyr, you know, with that really easy to remove barrel when you can put different types of barrels in and all that. Nothing beats the standard kind of, for me personally, I know I've fired a lot of different assault rifles. Nothing beats the standard like M4 platform.
So yeah, let's go from there. If the bullpup design would be so impractical, I wonder why manufacturers even bother with that design, or why there are militaries out there, armies, which are fielding bullpup rifles. So could there be an advantage regarding this design? And just in case you do not take my word for it, I let someone else explain.
So that barrel is quite long. In fact, this barrel is 16 inches in a very, very small package. So it's something that is very cool about the AUG and about bullpups in general, which is that you have a very small package and you have a rifle that has all the ballistic advantages that come with having a 16-inch barrel in a package that is actually about the size of a Mark 18. And in that case, the Mark 18 is actually slightly longer than the AUG. Pretty incredible, especially when you consider that the Mark 18 is a 10.3-inch barrel and is on the bleeding edge of both reliability and lethality when it comes to the 5.56.
So the intention of the Bullpup design is to have a relatively compact weapon without sacrificing on barrel length.
The longer the projectile stays in the barrel, the more powder from the round is able to burn, thus generating more energy pushing said projectile. So the longer the barrel, the faster the bullet. The general rule is the longer the barrel, the higher the velocity of the bullet when it exits. This is important as increased velocity allows the bullet to travel flatter, longer. This is a benefit for shooting at distance because the faster moving projectile spends less time in the air being affected by wind, and because the possible delta in the elevation is mitigated over the full range of the engagement, meaning a point hold will be more likely to score impacts for a longer distance due to less bullet drop and need for elevation adjustment. In addition, increased velocity also has a generally positive effect on terminal ballistics. Specifically, the more velocity a bullet impacts with, the more damage is done by said bullet. This is based on raw energy calculations, but also includes the concepts of fragmentation of the 5.56 projectile as it yaws through the target, which usually only takes place at higher velocity.
And then the total FPS gain between 10.3 and 16 is going to be 353 FPS.
So, as you can see, the lower you go in barrel length, the more massive the drop-off is, or the sacrifice in muzzle velocity. It more and more plateaus the higher you go, but the limit isn't reached yet. That would be around maybe 3,200 feet per second when you go past the 20 inches. Now, this does not matter that much when operating in close environments, house clearing, inner city fighting, close quarter combat. As far as I know, even a lot of special forces or police even traded in their submachine guns for short-barreled assault rifles, simply because they are compact enough to be handy in those narrow environments, while still being way more powerful than a submachine gun with pistol ammunition, which will struggle at penetrating body armor even at that range, where the assault rifle will have no issues with. However, all of this will matter in open terrain. The US Army, for example, did not introduce the M5, respectively the 6 Spear, with the new 6.8 by 51 millimeter hybrid ammunition, which is the actual main part of the new next generation squad weapon program. It's actually ammunition, which is the secret sauce. They did not do that without having any reason, and the reason was that a lot of GIs faced encounters in Afghanistan where the Taliban ambushed them in open terrain with an abundance of RPKs, RPDs, and PKM machine guns, which simply outranged the GIs with their M4s. So that's why they had to come up with a new idea. And the Bullpup simply has the advantage for being effective in a city fighting or house clearing because it's that compact, plus still being somewhat effective or being effective in open terrain. I guess that's why the Israelis use Bullpups as a standard issue rifle for their military. But let's hear more of Bobby Vala and his take on Bullpup rifles.
Here's the thing with Bullpups. Everything in firearms is made to go forward.
Yep.
Nothing should go back, except when you're extending a stock. But that's not the functionality of things. Forward. It's always a forward motion with firearms. The last fucking thing you want to do is, after you're firing, to have to go back to drop your fucking mag and reload. You always want to stay fucking straight as an arrow. So it's like you can drop the mag on an AR or an M4 platform and leave the rifle there and immediately just come to it. Trying to go backwards? You want to go backwards with a mag?
So forward. Okay. Could there also maybe be an advantage to go backwards?
Bullpups definitely have an advantage in length, but they also have an advantage in balance. So this rifle, most of the weight is back here, so I can actually have it in my shoulder and hold it in my shoulder for an extended period of time, and it's not going to become uncomfortable. As a matter of fact, as I pointed out before, I can fire one-handed with this and actually engage targets out to 100 yards. I still have my left hand free to grab doors, grab people, things like that. So the Bullpup has those advantages. When a traditional rifle, there's so much weight forward that this is going to become fatiguing very, very quickly. Even with an M4, especially when you have accessories on it, it's going to become very nose heavy. So holding it in the shoulder for any length of time one-handed really isn't going to be practical. But it's not like you do a whole lot of fighting one-handed anyway, but it's just something to point out.
So having a hand free could come in very handy when doing house clearing, you know, going through room to room, having to open doors, manipulate objects. So that would be one thing. And since Bobby already mentioned the awkward mag change, yeah, Tony mentioned something like that as well.
So I'm hands down, I'm not a fan of bullpup rifles. So, you know, any rifle where the magazine is behind the pistol, it just mag changes are so awkward, you know,
Yeah, it's very awkward.
Like a Scar or an M4. You've got a lot more room to change your magazine. So I'm not a fan of that.
Could this actually be more of an issue of the shooter?
Also, people would complain about the magazines in the Bullpup. They said that magazine changes were unintuitive and difficult to do, and that's just a training issue. That's simply not true. If you ask me, one of the things that you'll see some trainers teaching people to do on magazine reloads on a rifle is to bring the rifle up like this so you can see the magazine, put it in, drop the bolt, and go back to shooting, right? Not all trainers, but some trainers will teach you that. With the Bullpup, when I rotate the rifle, this is already in my workspace, right? So right here, it's right by my face where I can see it. I don't even have to do one of these, right? All I gotta do is just look down. It's right there. So in the dark, whatever, I can get that magazine in the gun. Also, with the Steyr AUG, the magazine is ambi on it, right? So you just push on it from either side and it'll drop the magazine out. Same thing with the VHS. It has a magazine release right there. You can pinch it from either side. The magazine will drop right out, very ambi friendly. So the magazine change, for me, is a training issue. If anything, I believe the Bullpup has a slight advantage over a conventional rifle like the M16 in being a little bit easier to reload once you get acclimated to it. Now, if you're used to this and been using it for 30 years, like myself, it is a hard transition. Just apply a little bit of time, maybe get some training, and that will be rectified.
So it's a training issue. And in fact, you can find lots of videos on YouTube with people performing quick mag changes with Bullpups. So much for awkward mag changes. Now, regarding this...
but the SA-80, which then became the L-85, has been the standard British Army infantry or British Army rifle since 1970, well, since the early 80s.
Been a while, yeah.
And that thing is an absolute piece of shit.
Yeah, it's
been
famously,
hated
it's
by the British.
famously bad.
Okay, everyone says, hey, the L85A1 is much better. They fixed a lot of problems. It's still so inferior to anything else. It's, you know, you may as well put a musket in the line, Bobby, you know, for your semi-futuristic line.
So what Tony says is right. The L85A1 is pretty bad, or was pretty bad. But time has passed. We're now looking at the L85A3, although actually it's still the A2, just with a minor enhancement. But the leap from the A1 to the A2 was significant. So in case you want to know more details about this, I suggest the channel Forgotten Weapons from Ian McCollum. He does a very good take on the L85A2. And while it would not be my favorite weapon, I would prefer it over a Chris Vector carbine any day because of the reasons given. More penetration power, more effective range, more compact. Yeah, by the way, let's do a comparison. So the Chris Vector carbine as such is 88 centimeters in length for about 35 inches. The standard issue M4 from the US Army with a 14.5 inch barrel is 84 centimeters with the stock extended, so 33 inches. Steyr AUG or Steyr AUG with an 18-inch barrel is 75 centimeters. Or 76, so roughly 29 inches. By the way, that could be around the same length that Tony Roberts' heavily customized M4 had with its 10.3-inch barrel. But you're looking at a difference of almost 8 inches, and you saw on the chart what that would mean. With 16 inches, you have a 27-inch length in the Steyr AUG. And then there is the IWI Tavor or X95, which is used by the Israeli army, by the way. And the Model 419 with 16.5 inch barrel is about 26 inches or 67 centimeters in length. And that thing, by the way, would be what I would have chosen for the Swarm Trooper instead of a Chris Vector, especially since airborne troops prefer compact weaponry. Before I go on to the next topic, there's one more thing I would like to debunk regarding the Steyr AUG. Here's Tony once more.
You take you try to take a magazine out of the pouch. It's got a small little lip on the side, so when it goes in, the latch locks onto the lip of the magazine. So the problem that creates is when you're trying to pull one out of a magazine pouch real quickly, it gets stuck in the pouch all the time. It's a absolute shit design. Really shit design.
So this problem that Tony Roberts describes here can be solved rather easily in two ways. Either use a proper magazine pouch. So that would be, for example, the Aztec Kiwi or Aztec Kiwi, I don't know how to pronounce it. I guess it's Kiwi, which is totally fit for the AUG magazines. Same with the high-speed Gear Taco magazine pouches. No issues with AUG magazines there. Option number two is to use a Steyr AUG NATO. Steyr AUG NATO is a modified Steyr AUG, which has different magazine feet in order to use regular Stanag magazines, like the M4. Stanag, for those who do not know, that means, or is short for Standardization Agreement. This means, among the NATO partners, they have certain procedures or equipment unified, like the ammunition, for example. So, there you go. Speaking of magazines, I would like to move on to my next item, which would be Tim Kennedy, aka Duster. Now, I bought this figure. I really like that figure, except for the weapon. In the videos that Bobby Vala posted about Tim Kennedy, or with Tim Kennedy, even he said that that would be his rifle, but in some ways it actually was not. So when you look at these stills here, you see that the magazine inside Tim Kennedy's rifle or SCAR is not curved. It's just straight rectangular. It's also a bit deeper, not longer, but a bit larger in size. That's because that's actually a SCAR 17, which is using 7.62 by 51 or 7.62 NATO ammunition. While the action figure has a SCAR 16 with 5.56 or 5.56 by 45 millimeter, which is the same ammunition the M4 uses. That's why it has the same magazines as the M4. So, but a SCAR 16, yes, it's in use by special forces. They like to use the SCAR 16S, for example, which is the compact version. But I would have preferred the actual SCAR 17, which Tim Kennedy was shown with. Also, maybe with the same color schemes. That would have been my pick I guess the reason was to like keep things unified, with magazines and stuff, production costs, whatever, but still. So I might have to buy a figure from this Monster Squad to get an actual Scar 17 for him. Next would be Carrack. No, not this Carrack. This Carrack. I like this figure, except for his Mossberg shotgun, which I find a bit, unspectacular. My choice would have been to equip him with the AA-12, which comes in a weapons pack Delta, but that's another weapons pack to buy for him. The AA-12 because it features a really good recoil compensation, and as such can be even, at close range, can be fired one-handed by any average Joe. Another option would have been the KS-23M, which is a Russian shotgun. It's by European standards, a 4-gauge shotgun. By American standards, I think it's 6.28. What does that mean? 6.28 gauge, 12 gauge. So a 12 gauge shotgun, the bore or the inner diameter of the barrel is wide enough that a ball or sphere of lead weighing 1/12 of a pound fits right in. That would be 12 gauge. So in that case, it would be 6.28. So 6.28, whatever part of a pound. If you take it by millimeters, the inner diameter of a 12 gauge shotgun is 18.5 millimeters. In case of 6.28, it's 23 millimeters. And so they have quite a substantial shotgun firing massive slugs or buckshots or even tear gas grenades and different kinds of ammunition. So that would have been quite a good addition for Carrack, quite fitting in my opinion. Continuing with weapons, an item which I did not buy, the Riot gear pack. I don't know why this comes with an AK-47, or maybe I mistake this for a Riot control gear pack. Then I think a Milker grenade launcher or something like that would have been more fitting for firing tear gas grenades. But I'm not really that fond of including the AK-47 as a whole. The reason is, I know the AK-47 is the most popular and well-spread assault rifle in the world. About 80 to 100 million were manufactured, but not only by Russia, but out of like 30 different countries. Most of them, of course, were part of the Warsaw Pact. In fact, you could even find some AK-47s made in Germany because they were manufactured in the German Democratic Republic back in the day. German Democratic Republic was East Germany. So the Chinese might even have produced the most AK-47s. They designated them the Norinco Type 56. They produced about 15 to 20 million, so between 1/4 and 1/5 of all AK-47s are Chinese. But the Russians moved on in 1974. The AK-74 appeared. The difference, apart from technical differences, the main difference is the caliber. While the AK-47 was chambered in 7.62 by 39 millimeter, the AK-74 came with the new 5.45 by 39 millimeter. So after Vietnam War, the Russians were somewhat intrigued by the American M16, and so they wanted a smaller intermediate cartridge for themselves. That's why. Now, when you look at them side by side, you can spot the differences, like in appearance, but when it comes to movies or news on television, who of you would really be able to distinguish between an AK-47 or an AK-74. So I guess, or my assumption is that the AK-74 helped the AK-47 a lot in popularity as well. Yet in my opinion, the action figures I would display with an AK-47 would be either some third world insurgent or a Somali pirate, for example. I mean, even the Taliban got now better equipment thanks to the US Army, and when they retreated rather quickly and unorganized in 2021. And since it's about a modern armor toy line in a near future setting, why not coming up with newer assault rifles or newer Russian assault rifles like the AK-12 or the AK-100 series, which was at least from around the millennia. One of my personal favorites would have been the AEK-971 or its successor, the 6P67. So all these would have been viable choices. They usually come with rails, so you can put attachments on this. The AK-47 does not feature any rails for attachments, which also makes it a bit more unfitting for the gear pack, because you have the infrared goggles, but then you don't have any infrared pointer for the gun, which actually makes a lot of sense for aiming at night. There's a general problem with weapons in Action Force that most of them are naked. I mean, here and there they have sights, mostly, ACOG, holo. You even find some weapons with an light or an IR pointer attached. But for the most part, they are pretty standard. Not really modern warfare or near future warfare or special forces like. So there is definitely room for improvement. I had hoped that the newly introduced FN Evols, respectively the Evolis, that's I think how the Belgians pronounce it, the Evolis, is also or naked, which would have come with some modern optics. And instead you can get it with funny color schemes. That's also a thing. You have like really nice and really detailed tattoos on the figures, but instead I would prefer camo patterns on the weapons, like urban camo, DD camo, desert woodland camo. That would make the weapons packs also way more worthwhile investment. Speaking of which, another interesting point would be the introduction of minigun. So since we're talking about a grounded, realistic military toy line, I don't know what this thing is doing in there. The handheld minigun as such was a failed experiment. They start with trying to make the M134 minigun portable. That didn't work out. That thing was way too heavy. Required lead acid batteries with another 45 pounds of weight plus the ammunition. So and then you would have just a few seconds of spray and pray, and then you had like a lot of useless weight to carry. Also, the thing that you could not properly aim at anything, since you could only fire from the hip. So it was rather impractical. They even tried to downsize it more. That was the XM214, which used 5.56 NATO or M4 ammunition instead of the larger 7.62 NATO ammunition. But even that's still way too heavy, way too impractical, way too cumbersome. So, if at all, if you want to bring failed weapon experiments in to Action Force, I would have chosen the the OICW, or the Objective Individual Combat Weapon, which also was not adopted by any military, was a failure, if you will, but still it would be way more realistic and way more practical, and probably even more effective than the minigun. Next would be repaint. So we had a lot of Swarm Trooper repaints in the past, like the Swarm Sentry, the Wasp Raider, the Horde Trooper. So I think, yeah, now there's a glow-in-the-dark Trooper coming out. What I was hoping for was a Swarm Scarab with the color scheme of the Wasp Raider. The reason for that is, yeah, that would be the correct color scheme for a Scarab. Let's move on to some upcoming stuff. That would be, for example, the Crimson Shadow or Crimson Shadow Praetorian. Pretty impressive action figure, but not fitting to the timeline. I would expect something like that for like the beginning of the 22nd century, but not in the next 10, 15 years, not near future at all. I mean, you could say the same for somewhat for Swarm, but there it's even more obvious. Also, why does this figure come with handheld weaponry and not really interesting weapons as such? If I had designed this figure, I would have designed weapons which could be attached in the sockets, like the shields that the figure comes with. So you would have weapons that are not handheld and leaving the hands of the Crimson Shadow free. Plus, or if you want to use the blade, so you could do both rather easily. So another missed opportunity in my opinion. But yeah, maybe another weapons or gear pack. Okay, let's move on to the elephant in the room, which is the Rezvani Vanguard, or I think in real life it's the Rezvani tank. Definitely would not have been my pick for vehicle for this toy line. Why is that? Well, as far as I know, no military is actually interested in this vehicle, not that I know of. Reason for that might be, or one of the reasons for that might be that Rezvani only offers it with petrol engines, at least according to their websites, while military or armies prefer diesel. That's because their trucks and tanks are using diesel. So if you then want to introduce vehicles with petrol engines, that would mean you would require separate fuel trucks, separate Bowsers, keeping everything separate, more costs regarding logistics. So that's why the military keeps this unified. For example, the Humvee will feature a diesel engine, the MRAP, and also the new JLTV or Joint Light Tactical Vehicle, which would have been my choice for an Action Force vehicle. Another reason is the selection of armament for this vehicle, which it actually does not have in reality, but yeah, that's fine. But yeah, I'm not really fond of a man turret. There's a reason for that. Actually, I can give you 3. So there you go. That's also why at least the US Army now moved on to provide remote control turret instead of manned turrets. That would be like the Kongsberg Protector, which can be outfitted with light machine guns, heavy machine guns, autocannons. So you have a variety of weapons which can be used with it. Then the missile turret. I wonder where the targeting sensor for this missile launcher is, because in order to lock on to a target and fire a guided missile at it, you need sensors. Maybe it's just unguided rockets then, but yeah, there is definitely something missing here. in that regard. So I'm not very fond of that missile shirt. Then, yeah, and the biggest issue I have with this vehicle definitely is the gas canisters inside the vehicle. So now that's what Bobby gave as a reason for putting those canisters inside.
The gas cans are going to be tucked in the sides of the trunk area because that's where they probably be sitting. People are like, oh, why don't you put them on the outsides? Well, no, because if you shot the outside and it blows up, then you're fucked. Granted, if it catches fire inside, you're fucked either. But there's a slimmer chance of it catching fire inside than someone shooting it outside.
Okay, so there's a reason why fuel canisters are usually placed outside the vehicle or the military vehicle, even a tank. Conventional ammunition from firearms like full metal jacket are highly unlikely to ignite fuel. But in order for them to in order to create a combustion, you would need something like high explosive or incendiary ammunition, or something between, a combination. Now, let's say you would have something like that, or whatever, some kind of explosive. Combustion or explosion as such would, regular physics would take the path of the least resistance. So a lot of energy would just go into thin air, and the vehicle as such would be impacted by a lesser amount of energy. Maybe not even enough to penetrate the chassis. That's also why, for example, in mining or tunneling, holes are drilled into the rock where the explosive is placed, because that has a way greater effect. With the canisters outside, that means that the chances are that the vehicle would suffer only minimal damage, might start to burn, yes, but the crew would have enough time to exit the vehicle. Now, with the canisters inside, this is a significantly higher threat, because if something enters the vehicle, probably through the rear hatch, which might be opened in order to fit the rear gunner, which is, I don't know why they made this there. Yeah, I know Tony's story about Iraq, but Tony was not in regular military. He was with some private contractor or private security company. They have they have improvised stuff as such, but the regular US Army, as far as I know, don't have this concept. But for now, this open hatch with the rear gunner is a huge weak spot. So if something enters the vehicle which should not enter and someone hits those fuel tanks or fuel canisters, that's a different story. Because then you have the explosion inside or combustion inside the vehicle, which would be fatal for the crew. Another thing would be like if after refueling the vehicle with those canisters, you put them back inside, there might be some spill on them from the petrol that might give the interior a nice odor, a nice smell. And whatever you do, don't put Colonel Siege inside the Rezvani Vanguard.
Hey, I don't think you better light it in here, man.
Why?
These gas fumes, man.
Oh, man.
I don't know.
Okay, that might be a bit of an exaggeration, but still, I think instead of using the boot or trunk of the vehicle as a rear gunner position and for the fuel canisters, I would have made it a storage for heavy weaponry or the backpacks for the action figures. Since you have no trailer yet for the tow bar, the Vanguard, as far as I've seen, it comes with a tow bar, which I really appreciate. The winch, I think, is a bit useless. I mean, it's a nice play feature maybe for a toy, but not many military vehicles come with a winch. So, and I wonder how actually this this kind of how this could get past the quality control of Rezvani, or if they had a say in this, but if that would have been on my desk for affirmation, I would have said, nah, go back to the drawing board and maybe change this and that to make it a bit more believable. Also, since you have some military expertise among Bobby Vala's closest associates, but apparently the only object of interest was the M240 Bravo. Yeah, Bravo. I also wonder why not Lima. Oh, but that's another story. Since we already mentioned Colonel Siege. Interesting figure. I kind of like it, but from the perspective of grounded military, this more reminds me of... Yeah, that's that. But the other upcoming figures, I'm really interested in Atlas. Buddha, or actually Buddha, I think with a double D, usually you keep the U or the vowel short as such, but could be different in English. So that figure, I like the theme of it, like the Japanese style, but I find the name Buddha a bit more interesting, or fitting names would have been something like Shinobi, which means the one who sneaks. Or maybe some other Buddhism gods, Bijamon, respectively Bijamon 10, which is a war god, and also one of the luck gods or gods of good fortune, or Taishaku, or Taishaku 10, which is a protector. There would be a few more things maybe, but those are really minor, so I would like to leave it at that and come to my verdict. Well, believe it or not, but I actually really like this toy line. Those are some of the figures I own. I've got more in my pile of shame back in Germany. Hope to be able to bring them over to Australia anytime soon. About the title of this video, Action Force or Action Farce. Do I think it's a farce? Well, yes and no. No, because you get something for your money. There's definitely value here. And those are quality toys. But yes, it is a farce when it comes to the aspect of grounded, realistic military toy line, because some of the stuff is outright cringeworthy. I also hope that Bobby Vala acquires more meaningful or useful licenses for Action Force in the near future. As far as I have heard, just see for yourself.
Well, it's funny is I'll say this because it's nothing to hide, but I love Exo Squad. It's one of my favorite 90s lines.
Mm-hmm.
Love the toy line. The toy line was so ahead of its time.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted that license, and I reached out to the owner of it, the guy who created it, and I said, hey, this is what I do. I would love to license it because, one, I wanted to do versions of the old stuff, but also I wanted to bring Exo Squad into a new realm and make it part of Action Force.
So with the idea to include Exo Squad into Action Force, Bobby Vala, in my opinion, is again overshooting the mark, at least in the perspective of grounded, realistic. So I would wish he would invest more into actual or real experimental weaponry or equipment, or licenses for real life vehicles. And there are vehicles out there which would fit right well into Action Force. I would like to take Bobby Vala up on this statement of his.
Someone had asked about a tank, and I think a tank would just be too massive. I want our vehicles to scale with our figures. And I just think that a tank would just be too difficult to do. And plus it's, it would take up the space of like a almost a 5-foot table. Wow. So to me, if I were going to do a tank, it would have to work with what the parameters of real world stuff is.
So a properly scaled tank would be 5 feet, according to Bobby Vala. Well, let's have a closer look. So, according to Bobby Vala, the Rezvani Vanguard is 20 inches in length, the Rezvani toy. A real-life Rezvani tank, as far as I know, is 5 meters. So if we do the math, 20 inches, 5 meters, so roughly 4 inches resemble 1 meter in real life. Yeah, 4 inches, 1 meter. Yeah, I know some people might come up with, yeah, it's upscaled the vehicle because otherwise the figures would not fit in, but it's for the sake now of simplicity, let's say 4 inches in case of the vehicle are 1 meter. Now, the chassis of the Abrams tank is about 8 meters in length. So we say 1 meter is 4 inches, then 8 meters would be 32 inches. That means that a tank actually would be less than 3 feet in length. Still pretty big, pretty large one, but almost half the size than what Bobby Vala stated. Of course, some smart guys, if you would come up now, well, there's also the barrel. Yeah, that would increase the length to about 10 meters. So we're now talking about 40 inches. But when it comes to packaging, for example, well, the Abrams tank has its turret a bit more mounted to the front, not fully centered. So if you turn the turret 180 degrees, the barrel might not exceed the rear, or not that much at least. In case of the new Abrams X, it might be, but still you would have a way smaller size than in way smaller lengths, which would make packaging a little easier. On a side note, the Abrams X would be a very good choice if Bobby Vala decided to work on a toy tank for Action Force. That is because the Abrams X has a crew of only 3 and they all are seated inside the chassis. The turret is fully automated and unmanned. There would be plenty of room left inside the turret for LED and sound, since Bobby Vala himself stated that it's not that expensive to include. Maybe even with RC control, like or using an app on your phone for controlling the tank, moving it around, and then turn the turret, and then having some LEDs and sounds for when you fire the guns. That would be quite interesting. But in my opinion, there are also way smaller alternatives for vehicles for Action Force, even smaller than the Rezvani Vanguard. But that's just my take on things. Of course, you might disagree. Some of you might have already risen their pitchforks and torches, but to those I would like to say, remember, when it's about the hardcore Hasbro G.I. Joe fans and their echo chamber, apparently there also has an echo chamber risen around Bobby Vala and Valaverse. It's the typical holy cow syndrome or fanboy syndrome, and personally, I think there are no holy cows. Definitely not Hasbro, not Mattel, but the same counts for Valaverse. And I would not take a constructive critic as hate. Personally, I really dislike the word hate, because in current times it's often misused or abused to not only kill a discussion, but also to demean the opposition and void any arguments without proper falsification. So yeah, I hope that at some point Bobby Vala will maybe listen to his, I would not say, yeah, maybe fans, but I would prefer the word customers. If not, then maybe what Michael French used to say holds true also in case of Valaverse.
The fans are doing the best work.
And yeah, with that, I would like to end my take on Valaverse Action Force. I will be back soon with a video about our Playmobil. Yeah, and until then, hopefully you subscribe to my channel. Please leave a like, that would be very helpful, and see you around.
Like, I'm thankful that the team there is listening to the fans. Like, that's what you should be doing. You should be listening to the fans.
There's experts out there that have been giving me amazing advice that I'm not listening to any of.
Like, I'm thankful that the team there is listening to the fans. Like, that's what you should be doing. You should be listening to the fans.
There's experts out there that have been giving me amazing advice that I'm not listening to any of.